So, as I understand, you came us from Moscow, yeah?
No, not yet. Next week I go to Moscow.
Okay. So you started from Petersburg and after go to...
So, yes, Petersburg, Moscow, and Seoul. Seoul, Korea.
Oh, nice.
I think so, first time.
So, in first part of our interview, I would be interested about how you came to improvisation. What was in beginning of your improv career?
Yes, well, when I first left school, I was a musician first, with a little bit of theatre, and then regular scripted theatre took over from music, and then improv took over from theatre, just because a friend who I worked with, another actor, started doing improv in Sydney, and he said, "Come on, let's go." So that was it. That was sometime in the 1990s, and then I had another long break. We started a little group for maybe 2 years, and then I had a long break touring with other theatre, and then in 2005 I started my company in Canberra, and that's when it became a religious experience.
Do you remember your first improv maybe scene or improv lesson?
Well, I remember the lesson. That was when my friend told me to come to Sydney, and it was with a lady called Lynn Pierce, who actually brought improv to Sydney. She'd done some work with Keith Johnstone, and then she came and began a group in Sydney, which is now 32 years old, the group. And she wrote what is, I think, still the only Australian book. And it was a manual for teachers about theatre sports. But of course, the funny thing you find out when you travel is that people learn things and then their interpretation when they come back is completely different. So Americans and Canadians actually think we don't do theatre sports, we do Aussie sports, because it was came from her interpretation. But now the Australian scene is very wide. So
how many groups in Australia?
Well, there's at least one group in each of the state capitals, and some very tiny ones outside the capitals. But in Sydney and Melbourne, there would be 5 or 6 different groups.
It's a professional group.
Look, it's the same as everywhere. Nobody retires to the Bahamas on improv. So the ensemble, the top ensemble of the bigger companies are fully professional, but most of the participants are amateur, and I guess a lot of even the professionals, we still do other training for companies, maybe some other acting, hosting, all of this to feed the dream.
Do you remember at what moment you decide to do mostly improv? You have different experience, theater experience and so on. Why you decide to do it in maybe 2005 or earlier?
Well, the reason I started the company was because I'd just begun a new life in the city that I live in, Canberra, and I'd finally ended up in the same city as another actor friend of mine, and it was accidental, really. We said, you know, what have we both done? Improv. All right, let's do that. Very quickly, I guess I knew that this was the thing for me. I couldn't tell why though. But there was a moment, maybe 3 or 4 years in. Canberra is a smaller city, and I remember my actor friends from other cities saying, "You're still in Canberra, you know, really? What are you doing with your life? Why don't you leave?" And I said, "Well, I can't leave my people." So actually, it was then that I realized that improv connects people so well and creates such a nice community that I can't go. I guess this is it. I guess this is it. Yeah. And even now, I would say that improvisation is a lifestyle rather than a job for me, and I don't separate the theatre from daily life in that way.
Yeah, it was my next question. What is your lifestyle now? As I understand, you are very a lot of traveling, different festivals. And
yes. I was organising Australia's international festival for a long time, and I knew that these great guests that would come were my friends. I knew they'd become my friends, and I knew that I was not destroying their shows, but I didn't feel that I was in the same category of improviser. But I suppose after a while there was nowhere else for me to go, nothing else I could do. So I had to see if someone would hire me overseas. The first one was Improv Fest in Gothenburg, Sweden. And then this was only 3 years ago. And it seemed, oh, actually, okay, it seems I'm all right. And I think this is one of the big problems for us as improvisers, is just to understand, in improv there is the saying, you are enough, you are enough. To get over our own crap and just go, okay, what I do is okay. So then the reports, I guess, of the workshops started coming in, and other people started hiring me. And last year I was away from Australia more than half the year. So.
How many festivals you visited in last year? Approximate.
Last year, maybe only about 8 festivals, with many weeks in between where I'm just visiting a group and teaching some workshops. And usually, you know, in a week, 3, 4 workshops and maybe 2 shows, maybe one of my own formats and something the local group is already doing.
So half time you travel worldwide?
Yes, it's crazy, and I'm just going to keep doing it until someone finds out that I'm a fraud, and then I will maybe write.
It's amazing.
Yeah, very lucky. I can't believe it.
And maybe what you remember of different improv groups in different countries?
Oh, I remember very little, because the socializing is an extremely important part of the community building. I suppose I think a lot about this "you are enough" idea, and about how the local culture affects what people do. So it's always more exciting for me when people are choosing to learn from everywhere, but allowing their own culture to affect what they do. Because many improv places don't do that. They just try to repeat maybe what one of the big American schools does. It's probably run by an American or an English or Canadian or an Australian. So when I see this, it's look, it's great. It's always great to do, but it's a little bit like watching a Japanese boy band doing the Beatles, you know. Whereas in some fantastic places like Taipei in Taiwan is a great example. They're really affected by their own culture, and you go and see that and go, wow, I've never seen anything like that, you know, and then I can learn as well.
And do you maybe feeling some difference in European different countries improvisation, or what difference?
Yes, well, the great thing, of course, is that we all speak the same language. So if you haven't traveled out of Russia, and you yet, then you will find friends and a bed and a meal in any city of the world, pretty much. You are already a member of that tribe, so because of our common language. But of course there are differences. So today we will teach a workshop called Boy Meets Girl. I think one of the great challenges in Eastern Europe and many places, Mediterranean countries too, is that male and female roles are quite defined compared to the rest of the world. So of course that affects the improv. So in these sorts of places, often any scene with a boy and a girl results in the boy trying to get it on with the girl. It's like, well, you know, there are a lot of possible scenes to play out there. You know, this is one. But on the other hand, Russia has such a great tradition of theatre. In fact, the first time I got to teach here, I'm thinking, wow, okay, teaching theatre in Russia, that's right. And so, even though probably most of your groups they're not full of people who have come from acting training, they're like everywhere else in the world, just people coming to improv for other reasons. You can't help having this tradition somewhere inside you. So there's something great and theatrical that happens in Russia. So, I mean, I could talk about many cultures in this way. I could say that in Northern Europe and perhaps ex-Soviet republics, some of the cultures are very internal, very quiet. So this is one of their challenges. I remember in Estonia, when I was actually teaching a professional theatre company, not an improv company, and they wanted to learn an improv format and try out the improv. So, you know, these are full-time professional actors, and they wanted to do a romantic comedy. So I asked them, well, what are your expectations for the audience? I know, you know, what do you want to challenge, you know, when you present this? I said, obviously, there's a physical contact thing, because what I'd found out in Estonia was that most people were reporting that their parents never touched them when they were growing up. What? Which is, you know, very different to us. And I said, now, of course, you're professional actors, so you're used to this, but you know, it's what you want to present to your audience that we need to think about. And they went, well, not so much, actually, with the touching. So we spent the whole first day on, you know, intimacy so that they could actually do a romantic.
Yeah. It's for me it's very interesting because I know Riga theaters,
Yes.
Estonian, Rahel, and Finland guys, and these nations very close.
Yes.
But improvisation from this country is amazing. So it's
Amazing.
very interesting for me. Why? How you do it?
Yes. Well, I guess the other thing I would say is that language does not become so important.
Yeah.
So in Taiwan, almost none of them spoke any English. So I had to work out, well, how do I communicate to them? And we did a lot of physical work, but also the exercises I learned to describe in one word of Mandarin, one word. So once they'd learnt it, we didn't have to talk about it again.
Yeah, maybe tell us something about typical steps in growth of improvisation. What you think about
For an individual?
typical? Maybe sometimes maybe in sport and in theater it's real steps. First year you should do this one, and the next year this one, and after 5 years you can go and do something on the scene.
Okay. Well, firstly, my ideas keep changing on this, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't be learning anything. But I guess, and it's interesting when you bring up sport. We can compare improvisation to any other type of activity in life. And I had to teach some athletes that were going to Rio to not worry so much about the problems that might happen off the field, so that they were ready. And so one of the big lessons that I brought back to theatre was what we do before we go on. You know, we're standing around in a circle, whoosh, zoom, pow, all this, getting very excited. And then we say, okay, the audience is coming in now. Everybody go to the side, stand in the dark, and don't worry. Well, sorry, it's plenty of time to go back in here and worry. So mindfully preparing yourself in those last few moments. And since that's before the show, as well as during, I now look at this in terms of how I teach. So first I get people to relax, be themselves, fail in front of each other, all of these things, just to try and get them over their fears, because these use up too much of our mind, and you can't do the things you learned because you. So I work on this first. For me, it's about the participants, mainly, that community. I told you my reasons. So I'm not someone who thinks you should wait a long time before you perform. I think it's the job of the organizer and the teacher to create a situation where you're going to be fine on stage. Exercises and scenes where it's still going to work, designed for your level. So first, we relax, then we learn some things, then you get up and do it. Then we continue on, but always trying to keep this idea that you're already okay. We're improvising right now. It's not so hard, is it? So all right, now go up there and do it. You know, that's the problem.
Okay, maybe last question. What you maybe recommended for Russian improv community, how to became more and more and more active and large, and what we can do to do it, to help it.
Yes, I think groups can get distracted by different problems. Always wanting to put on the type of show that's always popular, for example. But then maybe you don't grow so much as performers. So after a long time, this method doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, you reach the cutoff point. So presenting very different types of improv, learning different types of improv. Yes, the people that just wanted the short, funny stuff, some of them won't like it. But you get you begin a new audience, and you can still do the popular show. And I think maybe not being distracted by, as the community grows, of course people want to start their own groups and splits occur. Not being distracted by that. You're not in competition, you go about your own business, and the more improv there is out there, the more the overall community grows. And you think, good, you want to do that? Great.
Well done.
I would. Yes, yeah. So, yes, you stay together, learn to like each other, and we get bigger.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
It's great. Great to talk to you.
Yeah.